friend, welcome back to A Modern Homestead, and today we're talking water glassed eggs. So a year ago, we put up these eggs in a lime solution that's called water glassing. And today I just wanted to walk you through the pros and cons that we found, whether we'll do it again, and what the experience was really like. So you can see right away that there's a really striking difference between these two jars of eggs. And so I wanted to talk about this really quickly before we go talk about the usage and stuff like that. So this jar of eggs, totally fine. It looks really normal. The water is clear. The eggs are nice. This jar, I'll give you a close-up. Hopefully you're not squeamish. There's black in it. The eggs look really gray. There's stuff in the bottom. This looks really nasty. Okay, you can see there's like multiple cracked eggs and there's more black down there. So this is a jar that we would not use at all. This is not a safe jar to use. We did have a jar that had one cracked egg in it, but the water was still clear. It was just slightly tinged yellow. And we went ahead and kept it to see what the eggs were like. And when we opened that jar, all of the eggs were fine except for the cracked egg. There was no change in taste or color or anything like that. So that was fine. However, a jar like this with multiple cracked eggs, I think what happened here is that I water glassed them and left them on my kitchen counter. And it heated up and it cracked them. And so we have had that happen where I know that the eggs were fine, the water glassing worked perfectly, but then I just forgot about them on the counter and we threw that jar away. And then we left one to see what would happen, and it's disgusting. So don't do that. Go ahead and water glass them immediately and put them in a cool, dark place. All right, so let's grab a jar and go to the kitchen. So I'm sure that the question that you are wondering most is, did it work and would I do it again? So let me cover those two things first. Did the water glassing work to preserve the eggs at room temperature for a year? Yes. And if you're interested in knowing exactly how to do that, it is a very simple process. Just go to the video, I'll link it in the description, and you can watch the process for water glassing eggs. I highly recommend this if you have eggs that are fresh from your chickens or neighbor's chickens that you can get day of without being washed. So yes, bottom line, it did work. We were able to eat these daily. We use them for baking, for scrambled eggs. We did not use them for boiled eggs, and I'll talk about that here in a second, for hard-boiled eggs. But we use them for everything else. I would highly recommend it. It was amazing to have these on the shelf, to know that they were fresh and good. And then the second question is, would we do it again? Yes, 100%. We're going to do this again forever. I was very surprised at how little pickling lime it actually took to preserve all the eggs. I ended up buying a 3-pack of the pickling lime on Amazon for like $12 or whatever it was. And I didn't even use half a bag for all of the eggs we did last year. So for $12, I essentially got a 6-year supply of pickling lime for water glassing eggs. So it's a really cheap way to preserve. And then you can turn them into whatever you want. That's the thing for me. You know, I love freeze drying eggs. We also do that. That has a very specific purpose normally. And it's more of a very long-term emergency supply, whereas this is 1 year, I'm going to use them daily kind of a thing. And so the freeze-dried eggs become like long-term storage for me, whereas the water glassed eggs are more of a daily thing. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons. So the pros are that we have fresh eggs. They're totally fine. They tasted great. Con is that you can't boil the eggs. So we couldn't do like deviled eggs or anything like that. So for the Christmas and Thanksgiving holidays, we had to buy eggs to be able to boil them. I have heard that you can poke a hole in the end and boil them, but there were some other issues with ours that allowed us, or that kept us from being able to try that, but I'll probably try it next year. So like I said, we learned a lot about the process this year, and I wanted to share a couple of things with you that I didn't see written anywhere as I was reading about the process. Nobody really talked about this. And I got a lot of questions about what kind of eggs can you use, and the pros and cons of washed eggs versus non-washed eggs and that kind of thing. So let's just talk about that. We did a lot of experimenting. We labeled all the jars and everything so that we could give you a 1-year update on washed eggs, non-washed eggs, eggs that were 2 weeks old from the counter, eggs that were water glassed the same day. So I just want to walk you through some of that stuff. So we found that the absolute best fresh egg replacement quality for water glassing eggs is fresh eggs, unwashed the day that they were harvested, water glassed and put in a cool, dark place. Those eggs you can crack and you can scoop the yolk out. They are whole eggs, fresh. There's no waterlogging that happened, and they're good to use for icing. You know, you can whip the egg whites, all that stuff. You could boil them a lot more easily than the other type of eggs, which are either unwashed eggs that have been set out on the counter for more than 5 days, washed eggs, even if they're fresh and you wash them. Those can still be water glassed, but what's going to happen is you're going to get a waterlogged egg. And so when you crack it, the yolk is immediately going to break and it's going to be really watery. We still ate those. They were fine. The smell was fine. The yolk was clear, or the white was clear, all that stuff. We weren't concerned about it at all. They tasted the same. We used them for scrambled eggs, for baking. It was not a problem at all. But you could not separate the yolk. And so that was the really frustrating thing for me, is that if I had a recipe that called for 2 yolks and 1 white or something like that, I couldn't separate those eggs because they were really watery. And the reason behind that is that the bloom, the egg coating, it's kind of an oil coating on the outside of the egg that protects it from moisture and oxygen getting into it, it breaks down at room temperature also. So even if they are fresh, unwashed eggs, and unwashed eggs being fresh on the counter, you know, you could say they're fresh for 6 weeks if you don't wash them. But that bloom is still breaking down. And so after, 5 to 12 days, depending, we did some tests and it was like 5 to 12 days, that bloom is absorbed into that egg enough that when you water glass them, some of the water gets into it. It's not a concern. You're using filtered water and pickling lime, both of which are fine to consume. And that's not a problem in and of itself, but it does create a kind of lesser quality experience, especially if you're trying to bake and use those individual parts of the egg. If you're not trying to bake with it, you're just throwing them into a scrambled egg or into a casserole or into a cookie recipe, it's fine. But when you get to trying to make custard or pound cake or something that requires a lot of one part of the egg or another, meringue, icing, those things, you have to be able to separate the egg. And so what we have found is that actually fresh within 5 days, unwashed eggs that are clean, so that don't have any poop on them or feathers or anything, dirt. So clean nesting boxes results in clean eggs. 5 days, 10 if you want to push it, but 5 days is better. Going straight into the lime water and straight into the pantry is going to yield that fresh result. So that's really what we learned. Bottom line is that they have to be water glassed right away, and they need to be put into the pantry right away. I was really bad about that. We have a huge island. It's like a 3x9 island, and I would just water glass things and like put them on the edge of the island. And I would think, okay, I'm gonna put those in the pantry in a little bit. I'm gonna do some other things, bake, whatever it was. And then I would forget. And so a couple of days might go by and they were sitting in the sun. And we ended up, I think, only throwing away 2 jars of eggs just into the compost pit. And that was because being in the sun cracks them. I remember one time I water glassed eggs and set them on the counter and came back even just like 2 hours later, but it had been like right when the sun was really hot on that part of the island, and it was summer, so it was really hot. And the jar was warm, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, did I use warm water? And I forgot about it, but I just got it out of the Berkey filter, so it's just room temperature. But that's how hot they were getting inside that jar. So fresh eggs, water glass, put right into the pantry. Definitely won't have a problem at all. Those, I think, are the main questions that people had. Can you water glass eggs that are older? Can you water glass washed eggs that are fresh? Yes, but you're going to have that water logging, and it doesn't cause a problem for baking. Like I said, it doesn't cause a problem to eat them. They're not bad, but you'll have a better result if you have fresh, unwashed eggs. The other thing I wanted to mention just really quickly is the water test method. So this is something that everybody talks about, and I talked about it too, testing the eggs to make sure that they didn't float. Well, they don't float if they're waterlogged. It doesn't matter if they're bad or good. They won't float if they're waterlogged. And also, the lime seals the shell, whether or not it's, fresh or not, like it's going to seal that shell. And so it's not going to float. So the float test is not a good test for whether the water glassed eggs are still good or not. All you need to do is you can see as they come out of the jar, like you take the top one out, the top one's not floating. The one underneath that doesn't float up. You're going to take that one out. The next one doesn't float up. So they just don't float at all. So it's not a good test. So what you want to do is into a bowl, just crack each egg at a time, smell it, look at it, and then pour it into your recipe. You don't want to crack multiple eggs at a time because if you do find a bad one, it would ruin the whole batch. I've never found a bad one. Never found a bad one that was not already cracked. So like the ones that set in the sun and cracked, they were bad. I just threw them away. There was no way that they were going to be good. And so we didn't even try it. But if the egg is intact and it has been in water glass solution, like a lime solution, it's fine. Crack into a bowl just if it makes you feel better to look at it, and then go on. And then also people were asking if you could reuse the lime solution. No, don't do that. I mean, it's possible that you can and that it's fine, but don't reuse the lime water because the eggs are absorbing some of that lime solution into their shells. And so then the ratio is off for putting more eggs into it. It's really cheap. Don't try to skimp on it and reuse the lime water. Just go ahead and make fresh lime water. If you have a batch of eggs and one of the eggs breaks in the solution, just take the egg out. You don't have to make a new solution. I did test that also. In fact, I dropped an egg in there and it broke, and I continued adding eggs that were not broken and lime solution, and I waited a year to open those, and they were fine. That one egg had gone bad. The water was a little yellow, but the eggs themselves that were not cracked were fine. So I hope that this helps a little bit with some of the questions that you might have about water glassing. I'm really glad that we tried it. Before we would just freeze dry or dehydrate or go without eggs during the winter when our chickens would naturally lay less eggs, or if we were butchering chickens that year. And so now we don't have to do that. Now we can have water glass eggs, and they really are good. For a year, we have eggs that we waited specifically a year to try, and they tasted exactly like the ones that had been water glass 3 months ago. So I hope that you give this a try. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We put out homesteading content like this and tried and true recipes from our kitchen to yours weekly, and we'd love to have you on board. Thank you so much for being here, and please leave a comment if you have any questions, and any information that you need will be in the video description. We'll see you next time.